Hi, I'm Ken Jacobson, Senior Documentary Programmer, AFI Festivals, and I want to welcome you to AFI Docs 2020, presented by AT&T, and to this Q&A for the film One Life, directed by Josh Turnbow. First, I want to thank our supporters of the festival, our presenting sponsor, AT&T, our AFI members, and you, our audience. I also want to thank our three guests who are joining us for today's conversation. But before introducing them, I just want to let you know that One Life had its world premiere at the Cleveland International Film Festival, and we're thrilled to be able to screen it at this year's AFI Docs, and specifically on June 20th, which is World Refugee Day. So who are we joined by today? We're joined by director Josh Turnbow, who is a filmmaker with a love for crafting compelling stories and beautiful visuals, which I think is evident in today's film. Producing and directing many illuminating documentaries, the diverse subject matter of his films has ranged from sports to international crises. Turnbow's most recent work includes feature-length documentaries, The Observed Life, The Sign, American Standoff, Beacons of Hope, and One Life. Producer Akshay Shah is a film producer and owner of Invincible King Productions Incorporated. Akshay was born in San Jose, California during the Silicon Valley rush of the 1980s, but he spent his formative years growing up just outside of Washington, D.C. He went on to study business at Purdue University, receiving bachelor's degrees in both management and accounting, as well as a minor in finance. Akshay has rapidly climbed the ranks of the film industry and gained experience in all types of production, scripted and non-scripted, taking him from stages on studio lots in the Valley to refugee camps a world away. Akshay has handled a wide range of duties: budget development and management, talent, crew, vendor negotiations, logistical oversight, rights, licensing, content delivery, and distribution. And he is currently a member of the Producers Guild of America. Film subject Renan Asad was appointed as the World Food Programme's Chief of Staff in July 2017. The department focuses on strengthening the role WFP plays as one of the world's leading humanitarian agencies, while at the same time helping develop its strategic and progressive vision. Reporting to the Chief of Staff are a range of units and departments, including cash-based transfers, communications, information technology, innovation and change management, and the Office of the Executive Director. From 2015 until joining WFP, Mr. Asad was responsible for AT&T's operations management. Leading up to this role, he held multiple positions within AT&T, including serving as a director in corporate strategy. Prior to joining AT&T, Mr. Asad worked with Siemens and Nokia Networks from 2001 to 2008, and held positions in Europe, Asia Pacific, and the Middle East. In February of this year, Mr. Asad began his current role as Chief Program Officer for the Dubai Expo 2020. So with that, welcome again to our three guests. Thank you so much for being with us, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I thought I would start with you, Josh and Akshay, just to tell us a bit about how you came to this story, and really how did this film come about?
I'd love to start. So Rehan has been a critical and pivotal part of even getting access to the story from the very beginning. And as so many different projects we've worked on, conversations with friends about what was happening in the world led to this specific conversation about the Rohingya. And this was made possible through our mutual friend, Brad Bentley, who was an AT&T employee as well. He had known Rehan from before at the company, and in having a conversation with Brad, who's an acquaintance of mine, the conversation of the Rohingya came up, and Brad's direct relationship with Rehan, and the question of, like, very frankly, who's going to tell this story? And we assumed that there would be different people involved, like journalists. We're doing a great job of covering it. But we had an opportunity through Rehan and Brad's relationship to actually go and see the camp And this would have been in January of 2018. So that's kind of how it all started. We took a very small team to the camp. We had Rehan as our host to kind of explain the world of what was happening with the Rohingya. And that kind of set us on the question of, can we take this, what at that time would be turned into like a small promotional, a small documentary that could be used by Rehan's team into something larger. And the scale of the camp it's fairly enormous. So it was kind of a giant story to even consider how we would begin to tell it. But we had these unique entry points. Rehan, who's extremely approachable, from Bangladesh, and was willing to give us the access we needed through the World Food Program, which once you get there, you realize the World Food Program is kind of everything there. They handle, you know, people think that they feed the folks, but that's just one of the many things they do there. They really are the backbone of infrastructure to the entire camp and the very sustaining of the lives of all the people there. So from that point, about a month later, we began, we did our trip to the camp, and then we began the process of investigating how to tell this story.
Yeah, and you know, we had this unique way in, and then when we got there, we noticed all these people. They had barely been there for months, maybe 2 or 3 months when we had first arrived at the camps, and this is months after being violently kicked out of their homes. So there was still visible trauma and terror in their faces, especially women and children, many of whom still had fresh scars and bruises, and all of them had stories of this genocide that had taken place. And we saw it all firsthand through their eyes, the eyes of the victims. And then what kind of was the jarring thing was that there were hundreds of thousands of kids were still playing, running around in the camps, laughing and having a good time. So in that imagery, there's this immediate kind of juxtaposition between the innocence of this young generation and then the pain in the eyes of their parents and their grandparents. So when we came home and we saw the magnitude of this huge camp and the scale at which the aid was being delivered, and then this other more emotional element through the kids and their families, it was just, you know, we kind of had to put it all together and make it a bigger thing than we had initially set out to do.
And Rehan, tell us a bit about how you first came to work at the camp, and what some of your initial, you know, impressions were as somebody, you know, coming in from the World Food Program and having to kind of confront the enormous, you know, issues and obstacles that one would face. I mean, this is, you know, the world's largest refugee camp, I believe. I mean, it's an immense task. So tell us a bit about what your first impressions were and how you began to kind of size up the situation.
Thank you, Ken. World Food Program, WFP, is responsible globally to feed almost 100 million, the most vulnerable people, be that in Yemen, Syria, DRC, wherever there is a conflict, wherever there's a crisis, that's what WFP is responsible for. When this crisis has started, just like other crises, WFP was on the ground, not on day 1 or day 7. WFP was there on hour 0. In fact, this crisis, the world thinks this crisis started in 2017, but this crisis has been going on for years and years. The first time the Rohingya population moved, a group of Rohingya population, refugee, moved in Bangladesh in early 80s, then 91, then in 2000. So World Food Program already had an office there to help the population who moved in past events and did not go back. And World Food Program also provide the school meal program for that area. So still, I remember that in hour 0, one of our guys on the ground got a phone call that there were people moving from the Myanmar side to Bangladesh around 4 o'clock in the early morning. And between 4 o'clock early morning till people arrived, World Food Program went there in hour zero, day one, and provided the high energy biscuit for all the distressed people who start moving in. I'm talking about this August 2017, at the very, very beginning of the current crisis. Then as days passed by, the world came to know the severity of the issue, the magnitude of the issue, and the people completely, like every single day, 4, 5, 10,000, there are people who cross the border. So since day one, World Food Program had been there. And as Josh mentioned, that World Food Program's responsibility is not to provide the emergency food support. World Food Program is also responsible to provide the logistical support for the UN community, for the NGOs, and everybody who is there. What I must admit that since day one, it's not about just World Food Program. I would say that the people of Bangladesh, there's 160 million people in Bangladesh. Bangladesh, like being a small country, had its own population problem, but the population, Bangladesh government, or be it opposition member, opposition parties, or the armed forces, everybody opened their arm and welcomed these people. There are multiple, like the global community, the NGOs, Bangladesh government, host people, everybody played their role. Even the host population in that area, Josh, Akshay, and I had the opportunity to travel. The poor people who lives in a 2-room, like a hut or a small villas, they opened up their home to welcome these people. So the response was really from the very get-go, really very respectful and very coordinated to welcome this most distressed people. Now, your second part of your question, that how do I think of this compared to what's happening in the globally? See, today, there is around 25 million refugees globally. You talked about as a World Refugee Day, world kind of highlight the issue. This is not going down, this is going up and up and up. If you look into Syria, there is over 6 million people from Syria in Turkey, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and some of the Syrian refugees moved to Europe. You can look into Afghanistan, you can look into South Sudan. So the world there are conflicts, and war and conflicts is driving most of the displacement. When I compared that, whether it's a situation in Syria, situation in South Sudan or Afghanistan, this is a very unique issue. The reason why I say this is a very unique issue is that these people, think of what you can see in this video. The Kutupalong camp where this population lives is, think of a size of a downtown San Francisco. This part of the mountain was completely just pure greenery before August 2017. In 30 days, around 500,000 people moved. In around 60 days, 1 million people moved to a mountaintop, which has no infrastructure, nothing at all. So to make the 3 mountaintop, now it's kind of grew into 34 different camp location from zero. And you have to build their homes, you have to build their infrastructure, you have to build the water, you have to do the sanitation. So a city has been built out of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere, from zero, with the people who we have seen in the film that came with so much distress. So it is like everybody, the world, the local population, the host government has to come together to help these people to at least save their life and then kind of help them being alive. That was the biggest challenge. And I believe that the world and the government of Bangladesh and the people of Bangladesh has played their role to host these people and save this life.
So I think you've done a really great job of just describing the scale of this, both the scope of it and just how you had to go from, ground zero to basically a fully functioning city. but I wondered if we could scale it back at the level of storytelling, because, you know, Josh, you and Akshay kind of honed in on one story in particular, you know, that of the young girl, Noor Kalima. And how did you find Noor to tell her story? And, you know, what was the process of, you know, getting to know her and being with her, spending time with her?
Sure. So after our first initial trip in January, I, Ken, we were trying to figure out this idea of how to tell the story that was that had so much scale, and I was thinking about my own personal feelings of being in the camp. It's quite overwhelming because there's just a mass of people, and as Akshay said, the kids, there's just endless kids in the camp. And I mean, they are living at that time, and I think it's probably not much better now, but they just literally are naked in the dirt. They might have shoes on, and sometimes they don't. So it's just a primitive existence for the kids. So I was just kind of overwhelmed by that. I have children of my own, and I was like, what's their future? That question kept coming to me. What is their future? It seemed like a bleak question, but also maybe the best place to begin to try to tell a story like this. And we had met adults, and we had interviewed adults, but a child has an interesting view of the world. It's still very limited. It's not informed by many things. And so on our return trip, we decided this would be, I think it was in March, that we would attempt to find some unique stories on the ground. And preferably it would make a lot of sense to find the story of a child if we could. But as documentary goes, you know, trying to kind of conceive of a story before it exists doesn't really work. So we thought we would go in the best case scenario, we would find more stories to tell, dig into the history, and get more footage of the camp, which there's just endless possibilities for the camera there. I'm sure, you know, Ken, like, you can't find a bad shot in a place like that. It's incredible, and in a really sad way. So it was actually filming on a plateau that had been cleared off for new development. And, you know, as kids are apt to do, this looked like a soccer field to everyone, right? There was no place to play at the time in the camp. And so just all these kids were flooding onto this plateau area to play soccer. And there was these 3 little girls, and they were just watching everything happen. And they're beautiful people, the Rohingya. They're incredible looking. And these 3 little girls, sometimes when I look at a frame before I've shot it, it's already there. It's already a frame. It's already an image. And so I just kind of, you know, looked over at them with the camera, and one of them, Noor Kalima, did not shy away at all. In fact, she, you know, people describe this, what this is for folks, that they don't change any emote towards the lens. They just are more themselves. And she was like that. So I just filmed her a little bit, and then it just so happened that her cousin was there, and we were just talking back and forth. And it turned out that her uncle was near, who was her guardian, and we could at least talk to him to say, hey, can we find out what your story is and potentially film you for several days? And that's just how it happened. The next day, we spent the day with them, and the following day. And everyone has a unique story. Her unique story, which we did not know until we had thoroughly gone through the transcripts of the translation. We didn't know all the details with her father, because our translator had limited English to describe what he was hearing. So it felt like going in a little blind to the story. But we later learned that her story, like so many there, was dramatic. She She didn't know where her father was. She had lost her sister, one of her sisters, and she had to do this back and forth life between the uncle and the mom, and live in that tension. And she was just this innocent little creature that was just bold to the camera. She would go back and forth between being shy and not shy at all, and it was a joy to tell her story.
What can you give us an update on her and her family?
Sure.
What is happening now with her?
So it is kind of a sensitive thing to. It's almost like an anthropology study. Being there and filming is disruptive to what's happening to all the people. And frankly, at the time we were there, there's nothing going on. People were really bored. They would try to sustain themselves during the day, but anything that's out of the ordinary was interesting. So I think after we were done filming, it seemed appropriate that it may be detrimental to give them more attention. And then I'll throw to Akshay here, because we found a way to kind of have updates on the family without being intrusive in their lives. And getting in the attention of like a film crew is intrusive in that environment. And go ahead.
Yeah, and it can have ramifications with the people around them and their neighbors and that. But what we do know, and it can be said generally about all of the refugees, is that conditions in the camp have drastically improved. And I'm sure Rehan can go in more detail, but they have their homes established. They have somewhat of a normal rhythm of life. They're free to go worship. Their younger kids are still able to go to school. And then they have this food aid system that's empowering refugees with a shopping experience kind of thing. So they almost have it better than some Bangladeshis do in some ways. So as far as a refugee environment goes, this is possibly the best one in the world. So they're doing okay. The issues are still that freedom of movement is limited. I think they're building fencing around the camps now, and the government's limiting access to 3G and 4G networks for communication. And there's still this overall desire for all of them. They want to go home, and there's no progress on conditions for them to go home, really. They're still fighting across the border. There's still political dynamics that need sorting out. And, there is progress with the International Court in that they're requiring Aung San Suu Kyi to go provide testimony, and they're asking tough questions, and they're demanding accountability. But, that was the progress, and that's going to still take a lot of time. And this was all what happened before COVID-19.
I was going to ask about that. How has COVID-19 impacted this camp and really refugees worldwide? Maybe that's one for Rehan.
Yeah.
Sure. So, Ken, I must admit that, as you mentioned at the very early, that since February, I completed my tenure with UN, and I'm not with UN, but I do keep talk with my old colleague, and keep updated on the news. So on the COVID-19, I just read the news one day, just last night, that unfortunately the first person died from COVID-19 in the camp yesterday. And there are a little over 20 people who has been tested positive for COVID in that camp. Now, what's very crucial here is that you have seen the living environment of this 1 million people. And we all know that, okay, how COVID, or the world has some idea, things are changing with COVID every day, but the social distancing in an ideal environment, we can sit in our home and we can talk about work from home and all this thing. But when you're at a camp like that, the social distancing does not work. It's like 1 million people has been pushed in a tiny little place. There's only so much social distancing can happen. However, what I have seen is quite encouraging, that United Nations and all the NGOs and Bangladesh military and Bangladesh government is trying to help. Like just to give a simple example for a World Food Program, that rather than there are like around 1 million people WFP used to provide the food support, and you go to a store, you scan your card, you enter your PIN, and you get your food. So that was the smart contactless card-based system. What they did is that they changed to even some blockchain-based system where you don't have to enter the PIN code. So you don't touch the ATM machine, you reduce the contact. So, and then they have created the camps where if people came direct exposure to the COVID patients, you kind of do isolation. So yes, there are a lot of efforts as good as it's possible in that environment has been taken place, where people can be isolated. There are like makeshift hospital has been taken place. But I do worry that in an environment like that, and in an environment like any refugee camp in the world, what we have seen in a developed part of the world, I feel this is my personal opinion that to the underdeveloped world or developing world, this virus hasn't gone out in full proportion yet. Started in China, went to Europe, the US, some part of Asia Pacific, but you can see, if you look into where this virus is growing, you will see most of the places where COVID is growing currently are in the Southeast Asia and different part of Africa. So my personal take is it's yet to unfold. And these places, in this kind of refugee kind of environment, it could have catastrophic impact.
Fortunately, the UN is there.
Thank you.
But there's only so much that they can do. There's so much for us to talk about, and unfortunately, we're running low on time. So I wanted to, sort of end on this question of, for Josh and Akshay, and also you, Rehan. Really two questions. What do you hope to achieve with the film? What would be your primary hope that the film achieves in the world? And what, related to that, what do you want the audience to take away from it? What are the one or more things that you'd like them to take away from the film?
So I think going back to relating to your question about Nurkalima and what she's up to now, I think one of the more painful things for me personally, and I know Akshay too, is not knowing what's going to happen to her. We spent some time with her, but then we looked at her image for months and months as we worked on the project. And I can't help but think that for me, I kind of try to boil it down to simple things. We don't have any kind of control to do anything but tell a story. And so for me, a goal would be that something from this film would benefit this girl and all the many people like her. But that's the way I focus on it. Maybe this film will help Nurkalima and her family. That would be wonderful. And maybe through the vehicle of just more awareness for the story. We knew right away that this story had little to no traction in the United States, a place that has resource to help the people of the Rohingya beyond the international response. So that's my big thing. We called it One Life because of the concept that I could really only understand it from the point of view of experiencing mainly her story, one life. And then through that lens, have a feeling of empathy for all of the Rohingya people.
Yeah, and kind of carrying on with that, I think the hope is that this awareness is brought back here to America, where we don't know much about these things that are going on over there. And I was just as guilty as anyone of this before this project. I think we as Americans need to realize and remind ourselves that we have the responsibility of being a leader in the international community. And it's kind of crazy because through our tax dollars, we're the biggest donor of international aid, yet a majority of us are kind of clueless to what's happening outside of the US. And I think also historically, I believe that it's in this nation's blood to stand up for the little guy and stand up against oppression. And I think we need to ask ourselves, how can we just ignore atrocities like that, the ones that were happening in Myanmar and other ones around the world? I think we need to hold these people and their regimes accountable, and hopefully through the awareness that this film brings, those things kind of progress.
And Ken, can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
One thing that we discovered in this process is also, so many discoveries, but one of them was that the World Food Program is a giant organization, but it has key people in it. On the ground level, there's amazing people, but we met Renan Asad, who we consider a friend and just an incredible person. And he'll never tell you this because he's way too humble. But Rehan, his partner, David Beasley, the former governor and the chief of staff, but we found so many great people. It was our pleasure to tell their story. I would gladly do a documentary about Rehan because he's got an incredible story, but that we want an audience to know that. We want them to have an emotional response to some logo that says UN World Food Program, which I had none myself before. And it's been our pleasure to work with everyone from a driver that helped us to all the way up to Rehan, who's, I don't know how they're doing it without him, actually.
So Rehan, I think we're going to give you the last word, and I'm going to give you another question, which is just, I'm assuming you've seen the finished film, correct?
Yes.
So what would be one thing that you saw in the film that surprised you maybe, or made you think in a different way? I mean, you've lived this story, this is your experience, but the film is a different thing altogether. So what was one thing that you were surprised by in the film?
No, thank you, Ken. I will just give a 20-second reply to Josh's comment. And I honestly say this, and I really mean it. This is not about Rehan or the executive director, Governor David Beasley. The time I spent with World Food Program, there's 18,000 people work day and night in World Food Program in every part of the crisis around the world, day in, day out, 24/7. When everybody pulls out, this people goes in, and it doesn't matter which part of the world. Even if you think of the current COVID crisis, the people at the front line, it's World Food Program people. So it's an amazing, dynamic people who are doing their level best to keep the world safe and help the people. So it is not about me or the Governor David Beasley. It's every single person really, truly deserve that. Kudos. Now, going back, can you ask two questions? One is what the world can do, and what surprise or what one thing I learned from the film. The first part of your answer to your question is that, like many other crises, I see this as a saving life and helping with the livelihood. What the world has done last 2.5 years helped save million people life. The day one, I still remember when I arrived at that camp, I have first met, when I came down from the car, I met with the people who crossed the border, who are waiting early morning, around 8 o'clock in the morning in a queue to register and get their first meal. Some are still bleeding, sitting on the floor from their own. I heard from the first hand that how his father has been shot, how somebody's wife or sister has been raped. The trauma these people went through for 4 or 5 days to walk at every single night to cross the border, because in the daytime they will be shot at. So from that horror, from that crisis, I think that it came to a point that they found a safe haven which saved their life. Now, as Josh mentioned, that in that camp there is around near about 1 million people. There are around 200,000+ children there. There are children being born every single day in that camp. Rohingya people lost number of generations, which it's kind of correlates to your second question, that what did I learn? I was aware of the Rohingya crisis in 90s and 2000, but what I did not know that how systematic it was, the historical context of it, that how they have been deprived of education, how they have deprived of getting the government job, or how they have been deprived to being part of the Myanmar society. So that part I thought I knew, but this picture and the research Josh and Akshay and the team has done really illuminated my view that no, this is not just a one-time event. This is not just a two-time event. It has a historical context, and it has been going on and on and on. So that was really good learning for me. And if there is only one key message for the world, and being a US citizen, I must say that no other country financially helped more in this crisis than USAID or United States governments, and the taxpayer money from the United States helped saving these people's life by far more than anybody else. Now, these people, the world owes these people a future, because living in that camp, you can only do so much. There's 20,000 people working for the road or working for developing this thing. There's 200,000 kids who are growing up and below 5 years old. They have a future, and we owe this to them. The world helped them save their life. Now, we all need to do our part, help these people to do their livelihood. And the last is, don't need to get into the political solution or political discussion, but there has to be a political solution. These people cannot live forever in this tiny place. That's not life. So the world has to come together to help their livelihood and also find a political solution to this crisis. These people deserve better.
Well, thank you so much, Rehan, both for all of your work at the World Food Program and your insights today. And, I think we're all thankful for the work that the UN is doing, and for aid workers worldwide. And congratulations, and thank you, Akshay and Josh, for this really moving story that's an important story and an undertold story. And hopefully it will start to get more traction in the US. And I just want to urge everybody out there to please tell everyone you know that the film is screening for the rest of the day here at AFI DOCS. And we'd love to hear from you on social media at #AFI DOCS. And of course, you can find out more at docs.afi.com. So thank you again, congratulations, and be well.
Thank you, Ken.